Hello, and thank you for joining me. I have a question for you. Have you ever wondered what to do next when you've reached a turning point in your relationship when one or both of you said, this has got to stop? Something's got to change. We can't keep going on like this. Have you ever gotten to a point where you said that to yourself or you said that to each other? That's a question that I asked a couple that I talked about last time. Their names are Ben and Ada. And they got to that fork in the road, that turning point where they made that same statement. We just can't keep doing this over and over and over again. You know, they didn't like that they got to that point. Sometimes when they were upset with each other, it would leak out in front of other people, their children for sure. Sometimes family gatherings, at the extended family gatherings, holiday, not always, but sometimes their frustrations with each other would leak out. Now, this is a couple married for a long time, wonderful kids, a successful couple. But there was one place that they got stuck over and over again. So they got to this turning point and they made that statement and then they made a decision because there were several things that they didn't like about it. First of all, they didn't like that they weren't getting along about this issue. There were a lot of places where things were going okay, but this one place they got stuck over and over again. And they didn't like the version of themselves that they saw show up when they were upset with each other, with the yelling, with the put downs, with criticisms. You've probably heard about couples who get stuck like that. Um, that version of themselves did not appeal to either one of them. Now, they were totally aware of how the other person showed up, and they could describe it from 1 to 10 in 2 seconds. But then when they became reflective, then they were thinking, I don't like how I'm showing up either. So they made a decision. They made a decision that something had to change. Step one, they knew that they had to change their negative reactions to each other. No matter how irritated they got with each other, they knew they had to change that. They also began to realize that they were having a negative impact on each other when they were upset. They knew about the negative impact. Ben knew about the negative impact that Ada had on him, and Ada knew the negative impact that Ben had on her. But then when they began to think about how they were showing up, they became reflective because they were aware that they became fixated on how upsetting the other person was. Ben fixating on feeling that Ada was intrusive and reacting to that. Ada fixating on Ben shutting down and not listening when she was trying to give him information about what she was feeling. Um, so they thought about that. And once they understood the negative impact they had on the other person, they knew what they individually had to change. So they had 4 options that I can think of. One was to keep hurting each other and continue to be unhappy. The second choice or option was to keep hurting each other and try to be happy. I don't think any of us thinks that would work, but that's an option. The third option is to stop hurting each other and be unhappy because they have to give up their strategy. They have to give up their approach. So that would make them unhappy. And then the fourth option or choice was to stop hurting each other and be happy. Well, I think we all know which choice they made, right? Number 4. So to stop hurting each other and becoming more distant and more disconnected is not what they wanted. So they realized, they discovered that they had to start healing the damage so that they could begin to grow together and thrive together. They also realized that they needed a blueprint or map or something to do something different. And so they were introduced to a blueprint and a map that had 4 mile markers. So the first one that they became aware of, mile marker number 1, is for them to become aware of what they didn't know that they didn't know about how they were showing up and how they were impacting each other. I mean, they knew that they were hurting each other, but they didn't know the big picture. So they needed to know that. Now, they did get to that point when they made the decision that they were not going to, that they were going to stop what they were doing, which led them to mile marker number 2, which was they were aware of what to do differently, how to talk to each other differently, how to listen to each other differently, how to be present with each other more. So they gained awareness about what needed to be done and how it needed to be done. And then they were introduced to how to do it, what kind of habits they had to develop, how they needed to focus to stay on track. So they knew what to do, and they were introduced to what to do. And so they were ready for mile marker number 3, was to actually do it, and to do it over and over and over and over again until they developed new habits. Because the way that they were functioning in the power struggle was those habits to keep them in survival mode. You win, I lose. You're wrong, I'm right. Had to change. And so they had the new habits. They figured out what it is they needed to do differently. And so it was important for them to practice over and over again. I mean, they really had to think about it, because when a person goes into the heat of the moment and they're trying to get the other person to listen to them or do something different, it is so easy to revert back to the power struggle habits. So they had to consciously and intentionally focus on, this time I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do something different in terms of how I respond instead of react, knee-jerk reaction, in a way that is going to foster healing, that's going to foster growth, that's going to foster a deeper connection. And so they knew that developing new habits does not happen overnight. So they took the plunge. And so they did it over and over and over again. And what they realized over time was that they began to respond to each other differently when they were frustrated with each other. Because it doesn't mean that they would never, ever be frustrated with each other, because that's life. We do frustrate each other. Not intentionally, but sometimes we do, just being ourselves. So they got to mile marker number 4 because they practiced, they repeated the new behaviors over and over. They became new habits. And so they could respond to each other in a positive way without even thinking about it. Mile marker number 4, new habits were installed. So their journey began after they made that decision. They took the steps and they repeated the new behaviors over and over. And like I was saying earlier, change did not happen overnight, but they stayed with it. There's another part that's really important about what happened. The worst version of both of them showed up when they were upset, the way that they were reacting to each other. When they followed the blueprint and the map and repeated the new behaviors over and over again until they became new habits, guess what happened? Guess what showed up for both of them? A better version of themselves. Here's 3 examples. One is that they were more present with each other. I mean, they were listening, they were speaking in a way that the other person could hear. And when they were listening to each other, they were listening like with curiosity and understanding and empathy. That was the second one. The third one is they became more empathetic with each other. They could really understand where the other person was coming from. I tell you, that's one of the most soothing things that I have witnessed over the years, not only in my own marriage with Jesse, but with couples that we work with over the years. There's a magic that happens when people feel heard, understood, and seen. So they were able to bring that out um, in themselves and enjoy it in each other just by following this one blueprint. Just following this one blueprint. So I have a question for you. What about you? What about both of you? Have you reached a turning point like Ben and Ada? Or are you stuck in a situation that feels like you're in an endless cycle of frustration and conflict? If so, I'm certain that you followed your own blueprint and map to try to get a resolution. Because I know that when couples get stuck, it's not that they haven't tried to resolve the situation or manage the situation more effectively. It's just that their approach doesn't work. And their approach, the blueprint that they're following, keeps them stuck. They don't know any other way. Ben and Ada tried to resolve on their own. Well, they thought they were resolving on their own, but their approach did not work. So the other thing that happens about why couples stay stuck in that power struggle in terms of I win, you lose, is because they have tunnel vision of survival and blind spots for other options that will help them to get on the other side of it. So the blueprint that Ben and Ada followed is a blueprint that Jesse and I guided couples with through for years. And it's in the 3rd edition of our book, Mining for Gold in Your Relationship. And it's going to be available very, very, very soon. But in the meantime, because I'll be back and I'll let you know when it's going to be released, because it is an option to whatever you're doing that's not working. This is an option to have a different experience, to not only get through whatever you are working through, but to become better individually and as a couple in a way that enhances your relationship. I'll be back to tell you about that again soon. But in the meantime, think about your own blueprint, about working things through so that you are in a position to grow together and deepen your connection. I'll be back with the blueprint next time. Take care. Bye-bye.